It was early Sunday morning when the fight happened. The kind of fight that leaves silence heavier than words. My daughter, Emily, stood in the doorway, her face red, her hands trembling. I had just told her something she didn't want to hear, that her new fiancé wasn't the man she thought he was. Minutes later, she came back to the kitchen, calm, too calm. "Dad, I'm sorry," she said softly, pouring me a cup of coffee. The steam rose between us like a fragile truce. I took a sip, and something felt off. Bitter, metallic. And in that moment, as she watched me too closely, I knew. This wasn't just about coffee. The morning sun barely broke through the blinds when I heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway. My daughter, Emily, was awake early, unusual for a Sunday. I could tell by the rhythm of her steps that something was wrong. The air felt charged, heavy, as if the walls themselves remembered the argument from the night before. I sat at the kitchen table, my fingers wrapped around a cold mug of yesterday's coffee. My back ached, my head pounded, but it wasn't from age, it was from disappointment. "You're throwing your life away," I had told her. "That man doesn't love you, Emily. He loves what he can take from you." She had glared at me, her jaw tight, eyes glistening with angry tears. "You don't know him, Dad. Jason is good to me. He actually listens, unlike you." And before I could say another word, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. Now, only silence lingered, until she appeared again, standing in the doorway. Her hair was tied back neatly, her face pale but calm. Too calm. "Morning," she said, her tone strangely light. "Morning," I replied carefully. She walked to the counter, humming softly, and started making coffee. The sound of the grinder filled the kitchen, mixing with the faint scent of roasted beans. I watched her movements. Measured. Precise. She wasn't usually this graceful in the morning. Usually clumsy, half awake, forgetting sugar or spilling milk. But now, she looked deliberate. "Thought I'd make us some coffee," she said. "Make peace." "Peace, huh?" I chuckled softly, trying to ease the tension. "That's a first." She smiled. "I was thinking about what you said. Maybe I overreacted. You just want what's best for me." Something in her voice made me hesitate. It was warm, but rehearsed. She placed a steaming mug in front of me and sat opposite, hands folded on the table. "Here," she said, "freshly brewed." I took a sip. It was bitter, a little too bitter. "You changed the beans?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Jason got them for me," she replied. "He said it's an imported blend." The mention of his name made my stomach twist. I nodded and took another sip, just to be polite. But halfway through swallowing, a strange metallic aftertaste hit the back of my throat. My tongue felt numb for a second. "Everything okay?" Emily asked, her tone sharp, watchful. "Yeah," I said slowly, putting the mug down. "Just strong." She smiled again, but this time, her eyes didn't match the expression. We sat in silence. The clock ticked. Outside, a car passed. And then, I noticed her hands. They were trembling slightly. She kept rubbing her fingers together, glancing at me every few seconds, as if waiting for something to happen. My heart began to beat faster. Maybe it was the caffeine. Maybe not. "Emily," I said, leaning forward, "is something wrong?" She blinked rapidly. "No, Dad. Nothing at all. Just drink your coffee before it gets cold." Her voice had an edge, nervousness mixed with control. I stared at the cup again. The dark liquid rippled slightly as my hand trembled. I tried to shake off the feeling. I wanted to trust her. She was my daughter. My only child. But something deep inside whispered that this wasn't right. "You know," I said slowly, "your mother used to make coffee on Sundays. Always added a pinch of cinnamon." "I know," she replied softly. "She told me once." Her tone cracked for just a moment. I thought I saw guilt flicker across her face. Or maybe it was sadness. I couldn't tell. A few minutes passed. My chest began to feel tight. A faint heat spread across my arms, and a dull ache pulsed behind my eyes. "Emily," I said again, my voice unsteady, "what did you?" She stood up quickly, almost knocking her chair back. "Dad, maybe you should rest. You didn't sleep much last night." I blinked, my vision blurring for a moment. The world tilted slightly. Her calm tone now sounded distant, muffled. "I'll be right back," she said, stepping out of the kitchen. I heard the faint click of her phone unlocking, and then Jason's name. "Jason." I strained my ears. Her whisper carried from the hallway. "He drank it. I think it's working." My pulse thudded in my ears. My stomach clenched. My mind screamed for me to move, to shout, to do something. But all I could do was stare at the half-empty mug on the table. That bitter taste wasn't coffee. It was betrayal. I felt the room spin, the light dimming around the edges of my vision. My fingers slipped off the table, my breath came in short bursts, and the last thing I saw before everything went dark was Emily standing in the doorway again, her face pale, her lips trembling. "Dad?" she whispered, panic rising in her voice. "Dad," but it was too late. The silence swallowed everything. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was the soft flicker of fluorescent lights above me. My chest ached, my throat felt raw, and for a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the smell hit me, antiseptic, metallic, sharp. The hospital. I turned my head slightly, wincing at the soreness in my neck. Emily sat in the corner, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked like she hadn't slept, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back messily. When she noticed I was awake, she jumped to her feet. "Dad," she cried, rushing to my bedside. "Thank God you're okay." I blinked slowly, trying to gather my thoughts. "What? What happened?" "You fainted," she said quickly. "You just collapsed." I panicked, called the ambulance right away. Her voice trembled, but something in her eyes didn't match the fear in her tone. There was relief, yes, but also calculation, like she was measuring my reaction. The doctor entered before I could ask more. "Mr. Carter, you're lucky," he said, checking my chart. "You had a severe reaction to something. We're still waiting for the lab results, but your vitals are stabilizing." "Reaction?" I echoed weakly. He nodded. "Did you take any medication? Or eat or drink something unusual?" I hesitated. My eyes flicked to Emily. Her fingers tightened on the bedsheet. "No," I said finally. "Just coffee." He scribbled something down, frowning. "We'll run a full toxicology test, just to be safe." When he left, the silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Emily sat back down. Her voice was softer now, almost pleading. "Dad, please don't scare me like that again. I thought I lost you." I watched her closely. Her lip quivered, and tears welled up in her eyes. Perfect tears, like something rehearsed. But they didn't fall. I wanted to believe her. God knows I did. I've lost too many people already. My wife, my brother, my best friend. The thought of losing Emily, even emotionally, was unbearable. But behind her trembling voice, something didn't sit right. When the nurse came to check my blood pressure, Emily stepped out into the hallway. The door didn't close all the way. Through the narrow gap, I could hear her voice, low, hurried, whispering. "Yes, he's awake," she said. "No, he doesn't remember anything. They think it's just a reaction." "Jason." His voice was faint but unmistakable. "Good. Don't say a word about what we did. Just keep playing the caring daughter." My heart dropped. My hands clenched the blanket. The nurse adjusted my fore, unaware that every word I heard was shattering something inside me. When Emily returned, she had that same soft expression, practiced warmth. "You should rest," she said. "I'll stay here with you tonight." I nodded weakly. My mind was spinning, but I forced a faint smile. "You're a good daughter," I whispered. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, with something I couldn't quite name. Guilt? Fear? Or maybe realization that I wasn't as blind as she thought. That night, I pretended to sleep. The machines beeped softly beside me, and Emily sat scrolling on her phone. I watched her reflection in the window glass, her thumbs moving rapidly, typing, deleting, typing again. Around midnight, she leaned forward, whispering into her phone. "He's out. We can talk tomorrow." My chest burned with quiet anger. I wanted to confront her, demand the truth, scream that I wasn't her fool. But I stayed silent. Silence was my weapon now. When dawn came, I asked to be discharged. The doctors hesitated, but I insisted. "I feel fine," I said, forcing a calm smile. "Just tired." Emily drove me home, the car ride filled with awkward quiet. She kept glancing at me, her knuckles pale around the steering wheel. "You sure you're okay, Dad?" "Never better," I lied. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed something missing. The old coffee tin that used to sit by the window, gone. The same one we'd used that morning. "Where's the coffee?" I asked casually. "Oh," she said too quickly. I threw it out. It was stale. I nodded, pretending not to notice how her voice cracked on the word stale. Inside, the kitchen was spotless. Every surface gleamed. Too clean. Like someone trying to erase a crime. Later that night, when she left to run errands, I went into her room. I hadn't done that since she was a teenager. The guilt made my stomach twist, but the fear was stronger. Inside her desk drawer, under a pile of receipts, I found a small brown vial. Empty, with faint chemical residue at the bottom. The label was scratched off, but one word was still visible: sedative. My hands shook as I held it. She hadn't meant to kill me. She'd meant to scare me. To make me weak. To make me sign something. The house, the account, the insurance. Jason's plan. Her obedience. My foolishness. I stood in her room, staring at that empty vial, and for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize my own daughter. By the next morning, I had decided to act like nothing happened. Pretend I was the same weak, trusting father she thought I was. Because sometimes, silence uncovers more than confrontation ever could. I moved through the house like a ghost, listening to the creak of the floorboards and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Emily was in the living room, talking on the phone again. I could hear her pacing. "Yes, Jason," she whispered. "He's fine. The doctor said it was a reaction to something he ate." Pause. "I told you, he doesn't suspect a thing." Her voice was steady, confident, until I accidentally dropped the spoon. The metallic clang echoed through the hallway. She froze. "Dad," she called. I picked up the spoon and pretended to be clumsy. "Just making breakfast," I said lightly. "Old hands, you know." She came into the kitchen, a nervous smile plastered across her face. "You scared me," she said. "I tend to do that lately," I replied, meeting her eyes. For a moment, we just stood there, father and daughter, separated by more than the wooden table between us. The weight of everything unsaid filled the room. She glanced at the spot where the coffee tin used to sit, then quickly looked away. "Coffee?" she offered, reaching for the cabinet. "No," I said sharply. "I think I've had enough of that." Her smile faltered. "Right, of course." I could feel my heartbeat quicken. Every move she made felt like a performance. Every word felt rehearsed. But beneath it all, I saw something else: fear. She wasn't just lying to protect Jason. She was lying because she was trapped in something she didn't fully understand. After she left for work, I went to the kitchen counter and stared at the clean, empty space where the coffee used to be. My hand brushed against a small crack in the wood. Something sharp lodged inside. I pulled it out, a sliver of glass. A vial had broken there. My breath caught. That wasn't an accident. She had tried to clean it up, but missed this one fragment. I placed it in a napkin, folded it carefully, and hid it in my jacket pocket. Something inside me hardened. This wasn't about shock anymore. It was about clarity. That afternoon, the dizziness came back. I hadn't eaten much, and the air felt heavy. My chest tightened, and I stumbled into the living room, gripping the arm of the chair. The wall seemed to bend inward, the light dimming. I heard footsteps. Emily rushed in. "Dad, what's wrong?" My tongue felt heavy. I tried to speak, but only a broken sound came out. She grabbed her phone, but instead of calling an ambulance, she whispered again. "Jason, it's happening again. What do I do?" That one line pierced through the haze like a knife. Not help him. Not call 911. Just what do I do? Jason's voice crackled faintly from the speaker. "Calm down. Just make sure he signs it this time. He's too stubborn otherwise." My vision blurred completely. My knees gave out, and I fell hard against the floor. The world spun violently. "Dad," she shouted, crouching beside me. I saw panic on her face, genuine this time. Maybe she hadn't expected it to go this far. "Please, you're scaring me." I tried to grab her wrist, but my arm wouldn't move. My head was pounding like a drum. My breath came in shallow gasps. Then I saw her reach for the document folder on the table, the one Jason had left. "My will." "Dad, please, just sign this," she said frantically. "It's for your safety. If something happens." I forced the words out through the burning in my chest. "Emily, what did you do?" Tears streamed down her face. "I didn't mean," Jason said it was safe, "just to make you drowsy. That's all." My heart hammered. My throat burned. The room was fading again. Then, a crash. The front door burst open. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Parker. She'd come by to return a baking pan. Her eyes widened when she saw me on the floor. "Oh my God. Emily, call an ambulance." Emily froze. Her lips trembled. She didn't move. Mrs. Parker shoved her aside, grabbing the phone herself. "Hello, 911. He's not breathing right. Send someone now." The world dimmed again, voices blending into a blur. Sirens. Shouting. Hands on my chest. Oxygen mask. Then, nothing. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed. Tubes in my arms. A machine beeping steadily beside me. The doctor's voice came through the haze. Mr. Carter, you're a very lucky man. If that neighbor hadn't found you, it could have been fatal. I blinked. Fatal? He nodded gravely. We found traces of a strong sedative in your system. Enough to cause respiratory failure. Do you know where it came from? My eyes drifted toward the door. Emily wasn't there. I have an idea, I said softly. That night, as the lights dimmed and the ward fell silent, I made myself a promise. If my daughter truly tried to end me, or let someone convince her to, I wouldn't seek revenge with anger. No, I would do it quietly. I would make sure Jason and everyone who thought I was weak learned that a father's silence can be more dangerous than his rage. Because this time, I wasn't just fighting for survival. I was fighting for the truth. Hospitals have a strange way of making you feel both safe and trapped at the same time. The sterile smell, the muted footsteps, the quiet beeping of machines. It all gave me time to think, and thinking was the one thing I was good at. Emily came by that evening, carrying flowers. Yellow tulips. My wife used to love those. You look better, she said softly, setting them on the nightstand. Her voice was steady, too steady. Yeah, I said, watching her. Guess I'm tougher than I look. She smiled, but her eyes darted toward the machines. The doctor said you'll be home in a couple of days. Maybe we can start over then. Huh? Maybe, I said. We'll see. The nurse came in and handed me a folder. Mr. Carter, here's your preliminary test report. The police toxicology unit might need a copy. Do you have any family who should receive this if something happens? Emily's face stiffened for a fraction of a second. Just enough for me to see the flash of panic before she hid it behind another smile. I looked at the nurse and said, No, I'll handle it myself. When Emily left to get coffee, I opened the folder. My eyes scanned the lines. Barbiturates detected, inconsistent with prescribed medication. The dosage noted was dangerously high. This wasn't an accident. Someone had tried to make sure I wouldn't wake up, but they underestimated me. That night, I asked the nurse for my personal bag. Inside was my old phone, cracked, slow, but functional. I opened the home camera app. Years ago, I had installed small cameras in the kitchen and hallway after a burglary scare. I hadn't thought about them since. I scrolled through the footage from that Sunday morning. The timestamp flickered, 9:07 a.m. There she was, Emily, standing in the kitchen, her hair messy, her expression tight. She opened a drawer, pulled out a small brown vial, and poured something into a mug. Then, she hesitated. Her hands shook. She took a deep breath, and did it anyway. The footage showed everything. I paused the video, my throat tightening. My own daughter. The same girl I taught to ride a bike, to cook pancakes, to hold her mother's hand at the funeral, now poisoning me in my own home. But then something else caught my eye. She wasn't alone. Jason's voice came faintly through her phone speaker. Just a few drops. He'll sleep through it. You'll talk to him when he's calm. Are you sure this is safe? She asked, trembling. Trust me, he said. You'll thank me later. I froze the frame. It wasn't just her fault. He'd manipulated her. Used her. When Emily came back into the room, holding a paper cup, I had to force myself not to look at her differently. I accepted the coffee, pretending to drink. Thanks, sweetheart, I murmured. She smiled weakly. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. I know, I said. We'll talk when I get home. Later that night, when she left, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Michael Harris, my oldest friend, and more importantly, my lawyer. We'd served in the same unit decades ago. George, it's been forever, he said, surprised. What's going on? I need your help, I said quietly. And your discretion. I told him everything. Not about the emotions, just the facts. The coffee, the vial, the footage, the voices. There was silence for a moment. Then he sighed. George, are you sure you want to go down this road? It's your daughter. I'm sure, I said. But I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it for truth. He agreed to meet me at my house the next morning. When I was finally discharged, Emily insisted on driving me home. You shouldn't be alone, she said. Don't worry, I told her. Michael's coming by. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Michael Harris? The lawyer? That's right, I said. He's family, in a way. The ride was silent after that. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw Jason's car parked a block away. He thought he was clever, tinted windows, engine off. But I noticed. I always noticed. Inside the house, Emily hovered near the kitchen, fidgeting. "You want something to eat?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm fine." At exactly 2 p.m., Michael arrived. I saw relief wash over her face when she realized he wasn't a police officer. But that relief vanished when he opened his briefcase and took out several documents. "What's this?" she asked. "My new will," I said calmly. "I decided to make some changes." Her eyes widened. "Changes? What kind of changes?" "The kind that reflect who really stands by me," I said. She looked from me to Michael, then back again. "Dad, please," I said. I was sorry. I raised my hand. "I know you did. But sometimes sorry comes too late." Michael stayed silent, his expression unreadable. He knew better than to interfere. When she left the room to compose herself, I whispered to him, "The footage, I'll send it to you. Make sure it's safe." He nodded grimly. "You're planning something, aren't you?" "Not revenge," I said. "Closure." That night, when the house was quiet and Emily had gone to bed, I sat in the dark kitchen, the same place it had all begun. The clock ticked softly. I looked at the mug sitting in front of me, the one she'd used. I'd washed it, but I could still see a faint residue clinging to the bottom, a ghost of what almost ended me. My reflection in the window looked older, harder, colder. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I was just some frail old man too tired to fight back. They were wrong. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Every sound, the ticking of the clock, the faint creak of the floorboards, even the hum of the refrigerator, echoed like a countdown. I'd spent the night replaying everything in my head. Emily's trembling hands, Jason's calm, poisonous voice, the bitter taste of that coffee. They thought the game was over, but it had only just begun. I made myself a cup of black coffee, strong, untouched by anyone else's hands. The first sip burned down my throat like fire, and for the first time in days, I welcomed the pain. It meant I was alive. It meant I could still fight. At 8 a.m. sharp, Michael arrived. His expression was grim but steady. He carried a small brown envelope and a flash drive. "Everything's here," he said quietly. "The footage, copies, the lab results. I've locked one copy in my safe at the firm. Jason's voice is clear enough to be admissible." I nodded. "Good. And the will?" He slid another folder across the table. "Signed and sealed. Everything goes to your wife's foundation unless Emily comes to her senses and cuts ties with him for good." "Perfect," I said. "Now we wait." He studied me for a long moment. "George, are you sure about this? You're not just trying to punish her?" I smiled faintly. "This isn't punishment, Michael. It's education." When he left, I sat by the window and waited for Jason. I knew he'd show up eventually. A man like him couldn't resist the scent of control, especially when he thought he'd already won. And sure enough, by noon, I saw his silver Mercedes pull into the driveway. He stepped out wearing his usual arrogant smirk, expensive coat, and that same cologne I'd smelled on Emily's clothes more than once. He didn't even knock, just walked right in. "Mr. Carter," he said brightly. "Glad to see you're back on your feet. Must have been quite a scare, huh?" I forced a chuckle. "You could say that." He sat across from me, crossing one leg over the other, oozing confidence. "I just wanted to check in. Emily told me everything. You know, stress can do strange things to the body. Maybe you should think about retiring, letting her handle things around here." There it was, the real reason he'd come. I leaned back, pretending to think about it. "You're right," I said slowly. "Maybe it's time I passed the torch." His grin widened. "That's what I told her. You raised a smart woman, Mr. Carter. She takes after her mother," I said quietly. "Honest. Loyal." For a moment, the smile faltered on his face. I reached behind me, pulling out the small camera remote from my pocket, and pressed record. "Tell me, Jason," I said casually, "how long have you and Emily been planning this new chapter?" He shrugged, still confident. "A while. You know how it is. Young love, big dreams. She just needs support from family." I tilted my head. "And you think I'm the one holding her back?" He grinned again, sharper this time. "No offense, sir, but maybe it's time to step aside. Let her make her own decisions. You've done enough." I smiled back. "You're right. I have done enough." Then I reached for my phone and tapped the screen. The video played, the footage of Emily in the kitchen, Jason's voice instructing her. The color drained from his face instantly. What is this? He hissed. Evidence, I said calmly. You wanted me out of the picture, Jason. Consider this my farewell gift. He lunged forward, trying to grab the phone, but I was faster. Touch it, and I send the file to every contact she has, and the police. He froze. His composure cracked completely now. You don't understand, old man, he spat. She loves me. No, I said softly. She loves the version of you that doesn't exist. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then he laughed bitterly. You think this will stop me? You think you can ruin me with a video? I leaned forward, my voice low. You already ruined yourself. I stood, walking to the door. Get out of my house. You have until the police finish processing the evidence. After that, you'll be answering for every lie you've told. His jaw clenched, his eyes burning with rage. You'll regret this, he muttered. I already do, I said. Because I raised a daughter who thought you were worth trusting. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. When the silence returned, I exhaled slowly. My hands trembled, not from fear, from the weight of what I'd just done. I wasn't proud. I wasn't satisfied. I was just tired. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps upstairs. Emily appeared at the top of the staircase, pale and shaking. Dad, she whispered, what did you do? I looked up at her, my eyes heavy. What I should have done a long time ago, protect this family. She came down slowly, tears streaming down her face. Jason just called me. He said you're sending things to the police. Please, don't. You'll ruin everything. I stood still. No, Emily. He already did that. You just helped him finish the job. She fell to her knees, sobbing. I didn't mean to hurt you, I swear. I just wanted peace. He said it was harmless. I knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You wanted peace, but you brought poison into our home instead. Her body shook. Can you ever forgive me? I hesitated. My throat tightened. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, I whispered, and I'll never forget this. She broke down completely, clutching my hand, crying like the little girl she used to be. And though part of me wanted to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay, I couldn't. Because the truth was, it wouldn't. Not after that coffee. Not after that betrayal. Not ever again. The police came 2 days later. They were polite, professional, careful with their words, the kind of tone you use around an old man who might not survive another shock. But I was calm. I'd had time to prepare. Detective Larson, a tall woman with sharp eyes, set a folder on the table. Mr. Carter, we received the footage your attorney submitted. It's difficult to watch. I nodded slowly. It was difficult to live through. She studied me for a moment. The male voice, Jason Miller, we confirmed his identity. He's currently being held for questioning. We also found traces of barbiturates in your kitchen waste bin. The residue matches the substance in your bloodstream. And my daughter? I asked quietly. She's cooperating, the detective said carefully. We believe she was manipulated. She claims she thought it was a harmless sedative. I looked down at my hands, old, veined, trembling slightly. She wasn't lying, I murmured. She really believed that. Larson's tone softened. We won't pursue charges against her unless you insist. I shook my head. No, she'll punish herself more than any court ever could. The detective closed her folder, nodded respectfully, and left me with the silence I'd come to know too well. When the door closed, I sat back and exhaled. The weight on my chest was heavy, but not from the poison this time, from the emptiness left behind. Revenge wasn't supposed to feel this quiet. That evening, Emily came home. Her face was pale, eyes red and swollen. She looked 10 years older than she had a week ago. She didn't speak right away, just stood in the doorway, holding the same yellow tulips she'd brought to the hospital. I went to see him, she said finally. Jason. I said nothing. He begged me to wait for him. Said you set him up. Said you hate me. Her voice cracked. But I know now. I saw the messages he sent. The bank transfers. The plans. She sat down across from me, the same spot where she'd served me that poisoned coffee. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Dad, she whispered, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought he loved me. I looked at her, really looked at her, the same girl who used to run through this kitchen barefoot, chasing her mother's laughter. He didn't love you, Emily. He just loved what you could give him. And when he couldn't use me, he decided to use you. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Can we ever fix this? I wanted to say yes. God knows I wanted to. But forgiveness is a road with no shortcuts. and I was still standing at the beginning of it. I don't know, I said quietly. Maybe one day, but not today. She nodded, her shoulders shaking. I'll move out tomorrow, she said. You shouldn't have to see me. Stay, I said after a long pause. This is still your home. Just don't make me coffee for a while. She laughed weakly through her tears, and for a brief second, I saw a flicker of the daughter I used to know. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain tapped softly against the window, steady, cleansing. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same table that had witnessed every argument, every apology, every ghost of our family's past. I stared into the dark liquid, the bitter aroma rising like memory. There was no sweetness left in it, just truth. And maybe that was enough. At sunrise, the phone rang. It was Detective Larson again. Mr. Carter, she said. I thought you'd want to know. Jason Miller confessed early this morning. He's facing charges for attempted manslaughter and fraud. I closed my eyes, a faint, weary smile crossing my lips. Thank you, Detective. When I hung up, I looked around the quiet kitchen and whispered to no one. You see, Margaret? I kept my promise. I protected her, even from herself. The light broke through the blinds, soft and golden, landing across the tulips on the counter. They were starting to wilt, their petals curling inward, but they were still beautiful, still alive. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. Justice hadn't come with noise or fury. It had come in silence, the kind of silence that only an old man could understand. And in that silence, for the first time in years, I felt peace. The days that followed felt like walking through the ruins of a house after a fire, everything still standing, but nothing the same. Silence filled every corner of the home, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was hollow. Emily stayed. She cooked, cleaned, and tried to talk, but the words never landed right. We were like strangers learning to speak the same language again. Sometimes, I'd catch her standing by the kitchen counter, staring at the coffee machine like it was a grave. She'd bite her lip and walk away. The trial against Jason moved quickly. The evidence was undeniable. The recordings, the lab results, the bank documents Michael had uncovered. He didn't even try to deny it in the end. The man who once called me sir, with that arrogant grin, now stood in court, shackled and silent. I didn't go to the hearings. I didn't need to. I'd already seen enough of his face to last a lifetime. One afternoon, Michael stopped by to deliver the final papers. It's over, he said. Jason pleaded guilty. He'll serve 8 years, maybe less with good behavior. I nodded slowly. Good behavior, I muttered. Something he never had a day in his life. Michael gave me a look, part concern, part relief. You got what you wanted, George. Justice. I stared at the mug in my hands. The coffee had gone cold again. Justice, I repeated. Maybe, but it doesn't fix what's broken, does it? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. When he left, I went out to the porch. The late autumn air bit at my skin, the sky pale and stretched thin. The maple tree by the fence had shed most of its leaves, leaving only bare branches swaying in the wind. Emily stood in the yard, raking quietly. Her movements were slow, deliberate, the way someone moves when they're carrying guilt heavier than the rake itself. Looks good, I said. My voice startled her. She turned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Trying to keep busy, she said softly. Helps me think. I nodded. That's what I used to do after your mother passed. Her eyes flickered, full of unspoken pain. I miss her, she whispered. If she were here, none of this. She'd forgive you, I said, cutting her off. Faster than I can. Her lips trembled. Do you ever think you will? I looked out toward the horizon, where the sun was sinking behind the trees. Maybe, I said quietly. But forgiveness isn't a gift, Emily. It's a process. You'll have to walk it with me. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she nodded. Then I'll walk it, she whispered. That night, I dreamed of the past, of mornings filled with laughter, the smell of pancakes, the warmth of family. But every time I tried to reach them, they faded into the bitter scent of coffee. When I woke, the house was dark, save for a soft light in the kitchen. Emily was there, sitting at the table, her head resting on her folded arms. The coffee machine was unplugged, the mug beside her empty. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching her breathe. The faint sound of her quiet sniffling filled the air. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel anger, just sorrow. Not for myself, but for the little girl who grew up too fast, who trusted the wrong man, and who almost lost everything trying to be loved. I walked over and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She stirred, startled, then looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Go to bed," I said softly. "Tomorrow's another day." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I'll make breakfast in the morning," she whispered. "Just no coffee," I said with a faint smile. That made her laugh, a small, fragile laugh that cracked through the quiet like a first ray of light after a storm. When she went upstairs, I sat down in her place. The air was still. I looked at the unplugged machine, the empty mug, the faded tulips on the counter. There was no bitterness left in the smell of the house, just something gentler. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, it didn't hurt. Maybe that was what redemption really looked like. Not forgiveness, not vengeance, but simply learning how to breathe again in a home that once poisoned you. And as the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, I whispered into the quiet kitchen, "We'll be okay, kid. Somehow we'll be okay." The following weeks passed like a quiet storm. No thunder, no lightning, but the air was thick with everything unspoken. Emily and I lived under the same roof, but every word felt like stepping through broken glass. We were careful, gentle, afraid to hurt each other again. She tried to make things right in small ways. She'd leave breakfast on the table before leaving for work, wash my old flannel shirts without asking, even fix the squeaky door in the hallway that had annoyed me for years. But guilt hung over her like a shadow that sunlight couldn't reach. Every night, I'd hear her crying softly in her room. Sometimes I wanted to knock, to tell her it was okay, that I was still her father and she was still my little girl. But the words stuck in my throat, because part of me didn't know if it was okay. One morning, I found her sitting on the porch steps, staring at the old family photo hanging by the door, the one with her mother holding her as a toddler. "I keep looking at her face," she whispered when she saw me, trying to remember what she'd say if she saw me now. I sat beside her, groaning softly as my knees cracked. She'd probably say you're human, and humans mess up. She turned to me, her eyes wet. "Messing up is forgetting someone's birthday, Dad." I nearly. She couldn't finish the sentence. Her voice broke. I looked out at the street, quiet and still. "You didn't mean to kill me," I said simply. "You meant to silence me, to make me weak. That's different." Her breath caught. "Does that make it better?" "No," I said, "but it makes it forgivable." She looked at me, searching my face for something. Anger, compassion, anything. But all I could offer was tired honesty. "It'll take time," I said. "For both of us." A silence settled between us, but it wasn't the suffocating kind anymore. It was softer, fragile, the kind that held room for healing. Later that day, the mail arrived. Among the usual bills was an envelope with the state seal. Inside was a short letter. "The People versus Jason Miller, sentencing scheduled for December 12th. Emily's hands trembled as she read it. "Should we go?" she asked. I hesitated. "Do you want to?" She nodded. "I need to. I need to see it end." The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. Cold. Sterile. Jason stood at the front, hands cuffed, eyes hollow. He looked thinner, paler, like the walls had already begun to devour him. When the judge read the sentence, 8 years in state prison, with no chance of early parole, Jason didn't flinch. He turned his head slightly, and for a brief second, his gaze met Emily's. She didn't look away. He smirked, that same smug, venomous smirk I'd seen too many times before. But it didn't carry power anymore. It was empty. Emily whispered, "He can't hurt us now." "No," I said quietly. "But memories still can." When we left the courtroom, snow had started to fall. The air smelled clean, sharp, a promise of winter. Emily stopped on the courthouse steps and turned to me. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" I thought for a long time before answering. "She'd be proud that we're still standing." Emily smiled faintly, snowflakes catching in her hair. "Then that's enough for me." We drove home in silence, the kind of silence that didn't hurt this time. That night, I found her in the kitchen again, this time not crying, just sitting quietly, staring at the unplugged coffee machine. "I was thinking," she said as I walked in, "maybe we should donate that thing. Start fresh. Get a new one." I chuckled softly. "As long as you let me pick the beans." She laughed, a real laugh this time, soft but genuine. "Deal." For the first time in months, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt lived in. Imperfect, but alive. When she went to bed, I stayed up a while longer, watching the snow fall outside the window. The world looked clean again, untouched. And though my heart still ached when I thought of that morning, of the bitterness, the betrayal, the fear, I realized something. That day didn't destroy me. It woke me. Because sometimes, the people we love most are the ones who teach us the hardest truths. And sometimes, the quietest revenge isn't anger, it's surviving. It was a gray Saturday morning when Emily found it. I was in the backyard trimming the overgrown hedges when I heard her call my name, not in panic, but in a strange, trembling tone that sounded halfway between shock and hope. "Dad," she shouted from the porch. "Come here, please." I wiped my hands on my jacket and walked inside. She stood in the living room, holding a small wooden box. Dust clung to its corners, the brass latch tarnished with age. I hadn't seen it in years, not since your mother passed. "I found this in the attic," Emily said quietly. It was behind one of Mom's old winter coats. I froze. That box had been Margaret's. She kept her keepsakes in it, letters, photographs, tiny trinkets from our early years together. I hadn't opened it since the funeral. I couldn't. Emily placed it gently on the table. "I think there's something in here for you," she whispered. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My chest felt heavy, my hands unsteady. Finally, I unlatched the clasp. The hinges creaked softly, and inside, wrapped in faded floral paper, was a folded envelope addressed in Margaret's familiar handwriting. "To George, and to our daughter, if I'm gone." Emily gasped. "She wrote to us?" My throat tightened. I sat down slowly and unfolded the letter. The paper was yellowed, the ink slightly smudged, but the words were clear. Her voice echoed in every line. "My dearest George, if you're reading this, it means I'm not there to keep the peace between you two anymore. I know you. You'll try to carry the weight of the world, to protect Emily even from her own mistakes. And I know her. She'll inherit your stubbornness and my temper. Please, when the day comes when you fight, because you will, remember this. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's proof that love once mattered enough to hurt. Don't let pride destroy what years of love built. Promise me that, no matter what happens, you'll find your way back to each other. Because home isn't a place, George. It's a person. Love always. Margaret." I couldn't finish reading aloud. My eyes blurred. I handed the letter to Emily, who clutched it to her chest as if it were her mother's hand itself. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks. "Dad," she whispered. She knew. She always knew. I nodded, my own voice breaking. "Your mother had a way of seeing storms before they came." Emily sank to her knees beside my chair, sobbing softly. "I don't deserve her words," she said. "Or yours." I reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You do," I said. "That's why she wrote it. Because she believed in who we could be, not who we were at our worst." She leaned against me, her tears soaking into my sleeve, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I held her without hesitation. No anger, no resentment, just two broken souls clinging to what was left of love. We sat like that for a long time. The house felt warmer, quieter, as if Margaret herself was still there, smiling through the dust and memory. When Emily finally stood, she wiped her eyes and looked at me with a new kind of strength. "Dad, I want to make things right, not just with you, but with myself. I've been offered a job in town, at the shelter Mom used to volunteer at. I want to take it. I want to do something good again." My heart swelled with a mixture of pride and grief. "She'd like that," I said softly. "She always said helping others was how you healed yourself." Emily smiled weakly. "Then maybe it's time I start." That evening, we placed Margaret's letter back in the box, but this time, it didn't feel like burying something. It felt like planting it, letting it live again in us. Later, I made 2 cups of tea. Not coffee. Never coffee. We sat at the table, the letter between us, the quiet hum of the old clock filling the room. "You know," I said after a while, "your mother always believed that love was stronger than the worst thing we could do." Emily nodded, her eyes soft. And maybe she was right. I smiled faintly. Maybe she still is. Outside, the snow began to fall again, slow, gentle, forgiving. And for the first time since that poison morning, I felt like the bitterness in my heart had finally begun to fade. The winter sun rose slowly that morning, washing the house in pale gold. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that nipped at your fingers but still felt alive. I woke up before Emily, as I always did. Old habits die hard. When I walked into the kitchen, The first thing I noticed was the empty space on the counter. The coffee machine was gone. In its place sat two simple mugs, a small tin of tea, and a handwritten note in Emily's familiar, looping script. Dad, I made breakfast. No bitterness this time, just peace. Love, E. A quiet laugh escaped me. It was small, almost foreign after everything, but it was real. The smell of pancakes drifted from the stove. I hadn't tasted her cooking since before everything fell apart. The table was set, plates, butter, maple syrup, and those same tulips she kept replacing every week. Always fresh, always yellow. Margaret's favorite color. Emily walked in a moment later, still in her sweater, her hair tied back. Good morning, she said softly. Morning, I replied. You're up early. She smiled, sitting across from me. Guess I'm trying to live like you now. Up before the sun, making things right one breakfast at a time. I poured us both tea. For a while, we just ate in silence, the kind that didn't sting anymore. It was warm, familiar. After we finished, she slid a folded envelope across the table. What's this? I asked. My resignation, she said quietly. From my old firm. I'm starting at the shelter next week. They're short on hands, and I think Mom would have wanted that. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes still carried pain, but they also held something else now. Purpose, strength, a hint of peace. I'm proud of you, I said, my voice trembling. Your mother would be too. Emily smiled faintly. I'm just trying to be the daughter she believed I could be. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You already are. For the rest of the morning, we cleaned the house together. We laughed over old photos, dusted off forgotten corners, and shared quiet memories that had once been too painful to touch. When we reached the hallway, I found one of Margaret's old scarves hanging by the door. Without thinking, I handed it to Emily. It's yours now, I said. She wrapped it around her neck and smiled. It still smells like her. We stood there for a moment, just father and daughter, the last of our family, surrounded by the ghosts of what was and the promise of what could still be. Before she left for the store, she hesitated at the door. Dad, she said, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think we'll ever be the same again? I thought for a moment before answering. No, I said honestly. But maybe we're not supposed to be. Maybe we're meant to be something better. Her eyes softened. Something better, she repeated quietly, as if testing the words. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and walked out into the bright morning air. I stood by the window, watching her go, the scarf fluttering behind her, her boots crunching against the snow. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel sorrow. I just felt peace. I turned back toward the kitchen. The tulips glowed in the sunlight, their petals wide open. The tea had gone cold, but I didn't mind. I sat down, opened Margaret's letter one more time, and whispered to the empty room. You were right, my love. She found her way back. Outside, the world was quiet again, not empty, not bitter, just calm. And as the clock ticked softly, I realized something simple yet profound. Revenge may satisfy the wound, but forgiveness, even the slow kind, is what truly heals it. That morning, I took my first sip of peace. It tasted nothing like coffee. Dove epilogue. Months later, Emily came home with a little boy from the shelter, a quiet 6-year-old named Noah who'd lost his parents. She'd been mentoring him, helping him read. Dad, she said that day, her eyes bright with something I hadn't seen in years. I think we should give him a home. I looked at the boy, shy, curious, holding onto Emily's hand, and felt my heart swell. Then let's start again, I said softly. And for the first time in a long time, our house didn't feel haunted by what we lost. It felt alive with what we'd found.